The first testimony began with a line no one expected. The SHU is cold as the moon, and it's colder when you realize no one cares who breaks first. If stories like this fascinate you, hit subscribe, because this one only gets darker. For decades, Pelican Bay State Prison's security housing unit existed behind a wall of silence thicker than concrete. Officials called it a management tool. Inmates called it the hole with no bottom. Officers rarely talked about it at all. Not publicly. Not officially. And definitely not in writing. But in 2013, that changed. A single, anonymous envelope was delivered to a civil rights advocate in Sacramento. No return address. No fingerprints. Just 12 pages of typed confessions from someone who claimed to be a correctional officer working deep inside Pelican Bay's SHU. The tone was steady, clinical, almost detached, until it wasn't. One line cut straight through the reader: "I've watched men unravel in silence. I've watched coworkers do the same." The envelope was the first crack in a wall the state had spent years reinforcing. It suggested something officials had never admitted, that the SHU didn't just break inmates. It broke the people running it. Inside the unit, silence wasn't just a condition. It was the architecture. No speech. No movement. No human contact except the sound of cuffs sliding through a slot. Officers walked the tier with the same expressionless discipline inmates were expected to maintain. Everyone was part of the same machine. And the machine demanded emotional numbness. But that numbness wasn't holding anymore. 2 weeks after the first leak, another envelope surfaced. This one came with a warning written in shaky handwriting at the bottom of the page: "If this gets traced back to me, I'm done." The testimony inside described the SHU as a warehouse for human shadows. The writer said the light fixtures hummed so loud you could feel the vibrations in your teeth. He claimed some officers requested transfers after only a year because the silence was too alive. Each envelope carried the same fear: retaliation. Inside the prison. Outside the prison. From the department. From coworkers. No one was supposed to admit the SHU was more than concrete and rules. It was a psychological pressure chamber, and even the guards felt it. Meanwhile, inmates were beginning to file their own complaints with renewed confidence. Claims of hallucinations. Claims of retaliation for small infractions. Claims that officers avoided eye contact because they didn't want to see the damage. For the first time, the two sides, those locked in cells and those who walked past them, were describing the same experience. And that terrified officials. Because if both groups were saying the SHU was breaking people, then the question changed. It wasn't, are the conditions harsh? It became, how many people already shattered? One final envelope appeared a month later. No note. No signature. Just one sentence typed in the center of the page. Something is coming, and no one in this place is prepared for it. The third leak didn't describe a policy, an incident, or a single officer. It described a system. According to the anonymous writer, Pelican Bay's SHU operated on an unwritten code, one that everyone understood but no one acknowledged out loud. The code said the unit didn't just manage inmates. It managed behavior, obedience, and fear. And the pressure wasn't limited to the people inside the cells. One testimony said it plainly: you either adapt to the silence, or the silence adapts to you. Every officer had their own way of coping. Some kept their shifts strictly mechanical: no eye contact, no conversations, no unnecessary interactions. Others developed small rituals to keep sane: counting footsteps between cells, tapping the same beat on the metal rails, humming low enough that no one else would hear. But the testimonies revealed a darker coping mechanism too, one rooted in denial. Officers were discouraged from acknowledging what the unit did to people. Not officially, of course, but through jokes, dismissive comments, or the unspoken rule that emotional reactions were weaknesses. One guard wrote, "You're expected to walk past men losing their grip on reality and pretend it's routine." The inmates, meanwhile, understood the power dynamic better than anyone. With no movement, no program, no yard, the only leverage they had was information. A rumor. A threat. A lawsuit. A whispered accusation that could force a supervisor to come down and investigate. According to one testimony, certain officers feared paperwork more than they feared violence. A single allegation, true or not, could derail a career. And inside the SHU, where visibility was limited and interactions were brief, accusations were easy to make and harder to disprove. Pressure built on both sides. One leaked statement detailed an incident where an inmate claimed a guard had tampered with his mail. The officer denied it, but the rumors spread through the unit in hours. Men started refusing to come out for showers. Others began banging on their doors at night, demanding answers. The officer who supposedly started it all filed for a transfer within a week. His testimony ended with the line, "The silence isn't empty. It holds everything you don't say." Another guard described a moment when he walked the tier and realized he couldn't remember the last time he'd spoken a full sentence during a shift. Not to inmates. Not to co-workers. Not even to himself. He wrote, "You start to feel like you're disappearing with them." These weren't dramatic claims. They weren't sensational headlines. They were small, detailed moments, the kind that ring true. But one testimony stood out. It mentioned something that hadn't appeared in any other envelope. A phrase written almost casually, as if the writer didn't realize its impact. "There's a logbook in the observation room." Not the official one, the other one. That's where things really get recorded. Until that point, no one knew about any other logbook. No one outside the unit, at least. And if it existed, it meant something the state could never allow to become public. There were records, real, physical records, of things that weren't supposed to happen inside the SHU. The search for the hidden logbook began quietly, because no one wanted to admit they believed it existed. But the testimonies had triggered something: pressure from lawyers, pressure from advocates, pressure from the public. Eventually, someone inside Pelican Base slipped. A single line in an internal email mentioned duplicate records stored separately for staff review. That was enough. Investigators arrived unannounced. Not a raid, not a show of force, just a quiet walkthrough of the SHU that made officers straighten their posture and inmates press against their doors, trying to see what was happening. The unit was built to hide emotion, but that day, tension leaked through the cracks. The observation room was a small space behind reinforced glass, used for monitoring, paperwork, and the kind of conversations officers didn't want echoing down the tier. On the back shelf, behind several binders of routine documentation, investigators found a thin, unmarked notebook. No label. No dates on the cover. Just worn edges and faint indent marks where a pen had pressed too hard. It was the logbook. Inside were short entries, written by different hands. They weren't descriptions of official incidents, they were the things that didn't belong in reports. The things no supervisor wanted to sign off on. Cell 214 showing signs of breakdown. Keep him isolated. Inmate on hunger strike, no movement until further review. Officer Jones requested reassignment. Recommended denial. Night disturbances on the tier. Unclear if deliberate or symptomatic. One line stood out more than the others: recommend rotating staff more often. SHU affecting morale. It was the only sentence that admitted the toll wasn't one-sided. What struck investigators wasn't the content, it was the tone. No emotion. No reflection. Just cold, factual notes about people slipping mentally, both inmates and staff. It read like a medical chart for an entire unit slowly losing its grip. The discovery forced the state to respond. Officials tried to downplay the significance, calling it supplemental documentation, but the damage was done. If inmates had claimed deterioration, the state could dismiss it. If families complained, the department could deflect. But when the logbook and testimony showed guards saying the same thing, the narrative collapsed. Public pressure grew. lawsuits gained traction. Advocacy groups pointed to the logbook as proof of systemic harm. Even some officers stepped forward, carefully, anonymously, saying the leaks weren't exaggerations. Pelican Bay's SHU didn't crumble overnight. It never does. But the leaks cracked its armor. Gradually, policies shifted. Reviews increased. Transfers out of the unit became more common. And for the first time, the department acknowledged, cautiously, quietly, that isolation carried consequences for everyone involved. The leaked testimonies didn't free anyone. They didn't topple the system. But they exposed something the prison never intended the world to see. Behind all the concrete, behind the steel doors and heavy silence, there were people, guards and inmates, being shaped by the same environment. Human minds weren't meant to live in a place without sound, without touch, without time. And once the truth slipped out, there was no sealing it back inside the walls. If you think this story was intense, the next one will leave you speechless. Subscribe for more true crime stories that'll keep you on the edge of your seat.